This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Prepping for Irma. New warnings for Florida tonight as the destructive hurricane makes its way toward the Sunshine State.
Massive breach. Equifax says about half of the U.S. adult population could have had their personal information compromised. What should you do next?
How real is the insider threat?
I think that is probably one of our top concerns.
Our cameras were there when an airport employee was arrested in a security breach, giving you an exclusive look at the big business of security at one of the country's busiest terminals. Those stories and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Friday, September 8th.
Good evening, everyone. Officials are ramping up their warnings about Hurricane Irma. President Trump, in a tweet, said, "Get out of its way if possible." Florida's governor pleaded with residents within the state's evacuation zone to leave their homes. The head of FEMA today said Irma will be devastating to the United States. The hurricane is set to strike this weekend. Economic forecasters say its impact could prolong the slowdown in the U.S. economy, which is still digesting the impact of Hurricane Harvey, which hit Texas and the heart of the country's energy industry about 2 weeks ago. Tonight, Jackie DeAngelis is in Fort Lauderdale, where people are making last-minute preparations.
Residents of South Florida are streaming north, and the highways are packed with cars. Those leaving are rushing to fuel up. Gasoline shortages are being reported as far north as Tallahassee, even Georgia.
Here they are. We packed up our 5 cats and our dog, and we're driving up the West Coast to wherever it takes us. Right now we have been trying to get a hotel. There's no hotels anywhere.
But some have decided to hunker down and stay put, despite warnings from officials to evacuate ahead of the hurricane that has already wreaked havoc in the Caribbean.
I'm really scared about the storm. It's a little bit different this time.
Then why'd you decide to stay?
Yeah, I would like to stay. I would like to help the people after the storm.
It's not just the highways. Some residents booked flights to get out of town.
Yeah, I'm working here.
So what's your experience at work been with respect to the storm?
Well, pretty much it's been like mostly people going out. No one's coming in.
Those who are staying are nervous, but they've tried to take necessary measures to ensure safety.
I've done all I can do, and at this point, we made all the right decisions about how to prepare. And I just really got great faith in God that He's going to take care of this situation for us.
As the storm gets closer, many businesses are closing shop, including mom and pops and also the large retail chains. But those who are staying put are hoping for the best. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Jackie DeAngelis in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Florida is not the only state in a state of emergency. Ahead of Irma, Georgia's coast is also in the path of the storm, and that puts one of the nation's biggest shipping ports at risk. Diana Olick reports tonight from the Port of Savannah.
The containers are going up and on as quickly as possible. More than 4,000 on this ship alone. They have to get on so they can get out to sea and relative safety. Billions of dollars worth of international commerce are at stake.
We are a gateway to the Southeast, so all the states in the Southeast we're servicing through imported goods and exported goods. And very important, total of impact of about $84 billion a year for the Southeast.
The Port of Savannah is the 4th largest shipping container facility in North America by volume, but the largest by acreage, and that makes shoring it up an enormous task.
The most difficult thing is tying down these massive cranes behind me. They're ship-to-shore cranes, about 1,400 tons. They have hurricane tie-downs built into the crane, and we have tie-downs built in the dock as well. So the team has to go down and tie each crane down, 26 of them, and that'll take several hours.
The port must be fully secured by Saturday morning, as the Coast Guard will close down the channel by midnight Saturday night. The companies that move goods in and out of here, like Target, Amazon, Caterpillar, and Home Depot, to name a few, will just have to wait until the 1,200 or so workers get the all clear to come back.
After Hurricane Matthew last year, it took this port nearly 2 months, not just to become fully operational, but to catch up with all the commerce. Clearly, it is the economic engine for much of the state of Georgia. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olick in Savannah.
In Washington, President Trump signed into law a $15 billion disaster aid package, which also extends the government funding and the federal borrowing limit for 3 months. The House passed it earlier today and came despite objections linking the emergency funding to a temporary increase in the country's borrowing authority. It is the first piece of an aid package that some say could rival or maybe even exceed the $110 billion federal response, which followed Hurricane Katrina.
Meantime, on Wall Street today, it was a mixed finish for stocks. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 13 points to 21,797. NASDAQ dropped 37, and the S&P 500 was off 3. All the indexes were lower for the week on concerns about the weather impact, tensions with North Korea, and other issues.
As we reported yesterday, a massive breach at credit reporting company Equifax has exposed the personal information of nearly half of the adult U.S. population. Today, shares came under pressure, falling more than 13%. This is scrutiny of the companies ramping up. The House Financial Services Committee will hold a hearing on the issue as other lawmakers and consumers are demanding some answers. Aditi Roy has the story.
Gabriel Gastelum is worried. He owns a home, a car, and uses credit cards. That makes him a likely victim of the Equifax cyber attack.
This is supposed to be a company that is supposed to help you when issues like that come about. And if the people who are trying to help you, are supposed to help you, are the ones being hacked, then what do you do after that?
Equifax, one of the top 3 credit reporting companies in the country, says 143 million Americans, or nearly half the country, might have been impacted. The information accessed includes names, social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, and in some cases, driver's licenses. 209,000 credit card numbers were breached.
That makes it one of the largest, if not the largest, breaches of PII, or personally identifying information, that we've seen to date.
Adding to the outrage, news that 3 of the company's executives sold nearly $2 million of Equifax shares days after the cyber attack was discovered. The company claims those executives did not know about the breach when they sold the shares. Equifax has set up a toll-free number and website dedicated to customers who may have been impacted. On it, a message from CEO Richard Smith.
I deeply regret this incident, and I apologize to every affected consumer and all of our partners.
But one class action suit has already been filed, and the New York Attorney General has launched a formal investigation. And the House Financial Services Committee just announced it will hold a hearing on the issue. Meantime, experts recommend consumers lock their credits so they'll be alerted if anyone tries to open a credit card in their name. Also, create an online profile with the IRS so no one uses your social security number to create a fake one. And change passwords for your online profiles. Gastelum worries it might be too late to protect himself.
We don't have a choice. Equifax is one of the leading credit score providers, and we don't have a choice. Had we had a choice, then I wouldn't use it.
Already, analysts estimate the cost of the breach could reach $300 million, similar in scale to the Target or Home Depot breaches. And in yet another twist, a source tells me the company website that was created to help customers who may be impacted also has security issues. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Aditi Roy, San Francisco.
Let's turn now to Tim Maurer to discuss what you should be doing to protect your finances, your privacy. He's Director of Personal Finance at the BAM Alliance. Tim, this is a mess. As Didi just pointed out, obviously the main system there was breached. There may be issues involving the sort of follow-up, how to help yourself when you've been affected by this. Tell me what I should do if I suspect I have been one of the people, the 140-some million people whose information may have been compromised here. It's already done. Somebody's already got it.
Yeah, Tyler, they got a ton of information too, and it looks actually like they may have gotten mine. Of the 4 people in my family, I think I was the one who was affected, unfortunately. So now they've got my driver's license information, my social security number, and probably my favorite beer. It's amazing how much information they got, but they are not holding all the cards. The hackers still don't have your passwords and your PIN numbers. So you should immediately go to your banks and financial institutions and change those passwords, because that should be information that the hackers don't have. I also recommend letting your bank and your brokerage firm and any other financial services companies know if you do determine that you were one of the hacked in the Equifax situation.
How do you know? How did you find out that you were?
Right.
Well, I went onto that website that you're now saying might be involving some lack of security and fraud in and of itself. But I went directly to that website. I followed the process that Equifax asked me to do, and they gave me the information that I may have been hacked. It said that the other 3 members of my family had not been affected.
So, Tim, there is a lot of different recommendations that are out there. You said change your password, change your PINs. There are a number of experts who are recommending freezing your credit, but there's big discussion about how easy that is to do and what the implications are once you have frozen your credit.
Sure. It may not be particularly easy because it's different on a state-by-state basis, and it may even be different within your state based on each of the 3 credit bureaus. But it is the strongest form of locking down your credit. Now, let me be clear. It doesn't mean that people cannot hack or defraud you. It just means that you're likely to get notification faster if you've frozen your credit.
Well,
you
how do you
don't
do
want to
that?
freeze your credit.
What does that mean? Do you call the credit agency and say, I don't want anybody accessing my credit report and trying to open an account for me, or what? What does that mean?
Yes, each of the agencies will have their own process. If you call them directly, they'll direct you either to something, an online form, or you can even do a handwritten form if you would prefer that. One of the big challenges we see, though, guys, is that if you want to use your credit in the near term, you don't necessarily want to freeze it. But I have been told that every single one of us should be freezing our minor children's credit reports. And so that's something that I'm currently undertaking for my 11 and 13-year-old. They actually have a credit report, which is kind of scary to begin with because they don't have any credit. We know if they've had any activity on those, it's definitely fraudulent.
That's a topic for another day, why children would have credit files on them. But at any rate, we do have to leave it there, Tim. Continued good luck. I hope nobody hacks you. Tim Maurer with BAM Alliance. Still ahead, did you know this? I bet you didn't know this. It's 401k day. Find out if you're making the most of your retirement options.
Today is National 401k Day, and that's a day designed to remind the nearly 55 million Americans enrolled in a company-sponsored retirement plan to check in on their retirement savings. Sara Holden joins us. She is Senior Director of Retirement and Investor Research at the Investment Company Institute, and she joins us here on the set to talk about that. Welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So it's National 401k Day. What is the first thing, if you do decide to check in on how your plan is doing, what should you be looking for? What should you be checking?
Well, the first thing you want to do is check your contribution levels, because 9 out of 10 participants are in plans where the employer puts money into their account. But in many cases, the employer only puts money in if you put money in yourself. So you want to be sure that you are contributing at least enough to get that employer match, because otherwise you are literally leaving money on the table. The other thing you might want to do is, if you've been enrolled for a while and you haven't revisited the account, maybe you were young when you first set up your contribution rate. Typically, people increase their contribution rate as they get older, or they sign on to auto increase, so it happens for them. And that way, as you're moving away from saving for a house and education, you can focus more on retirement saving. You actually increase your contributions. And the other big milestone is when you turn 50, you can take advantage of catch-up contributions, which means you can put in even more to build that nest egg now that you're really focused on retirement saving.
What are the limits? Do you have them on the top of your head? I don't mean to put you on the spot here.
Yeah, sure. So a 401k plan for the individual to put in on a pre-tax basis is $18,000. And then if you're over 50 or older, you can put in another $6,000.
It's like you're speaking to me. It's like you're speaking to me, Sarah.
Perhaps both of us, Ty.
We don't need to go into this right now.
No, that's okay. We're very honest with the viewers. Are you finding that most people are, in your research, most people are fully utilizing the tools available to them to build their 401k? Or do they kind of check off the boxes and then they don't revisit it very often?
Yeah, so I think that we've had a lot of plan design change over time. So a lot of things to make things automatic, which makes it easier to get people on that path. And so the risk is you go on that path and you don't go revisit it. And it really is important to revisit it. So for example, the investment options may have changed over time. The typical plan today has more than 20 investment options as your choices. Now, your employer has set this up as a benefit for you. There's typically 10 different equity fund choices. So there can be index and foreign and domestic. And you want to be sure that you've looked at the investments that you've got your money in to see if you've taken advantage of all the options that are currently there.
Quick answer here. One of the attractions is that this is pre-tax money.
Yes, indeed.
There is some talk on the Hill, and ICI has their finger on the Hill, that tax advantage may be taken away as part of tax reform. What are you hearing?
So, well, in general, we're in favor of simplifying, the tax code, but it really cannot be done on the backs of these retirement savers. These tax incentives have encouraged millions of Americans to save for retirement, and we've actually done surveys of U.S. households, and even people who don't have an account today say, don't take away these tax incentives. These tax incentives are so important.
Sara, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Happy 401k day.
Oh, same to you.
Sara Holden with the Investment Company Institute.
All right, investors took a bite out of Kroger shares, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. Growing competition caused the supermarket operator to slash prices in the latest quarter, and that ate into results. It also suspended its long-term earnings guidance. Shares of Kroger down 7.5% to 21.06. Another retailer lowering its prices now is Target. In a blog post, the company said it has cut prices on thousands of items, including baby formula, paper towels. The news concerned investors about the health of Target's profit margins. So as you might expect, shares tumbled. They were down nearly 2% on the session at 57.27.
A federal judge has sided with Apple in its royalty patent lawsuit against Qualcomm. The judge rejected Qualcomm's request to dismiss the suit. Earlier this year, Apple sued Qualcomm, alleging that the chipmaker demanded unfair licensing terms. Shares of both Apple and Qualcomm fell more than 1%. And analysts at Cowen slapped a sell rating on Chipotle, saying the company is struggling to win back consumers. The analyst also questioned the chain's planned price increases over the next few quarters. Chipotle shares fell more than 5% to $300.03.
And now to our weekly market monitor, betting on the economy. He likes stocks he says will benefit from economic growth in the U.S. and Europe. Mark Blasini is Chief Investment Officer at Janney Montgomery Scott. Mark, it's been a very busy news day, so we're going to go straight to your stock picks here, leading off with an ETF that goes under the ticker ITB. What shares does it invest in? Why do you like it?
Absolutely, Tyler. It's home builders, and we're constructive on the U.S. economy. The consumer we're particularly bullish about, and we know that the demographic trends are very supportive for the household formation, which is going to lead ultimately to home buying. And as a consequence, we think this, while it's done well, and it's certainly a mature cycle at this juncture, has a much more longer runway to go.
All right, Mark, let's move on to Legg Mason. You think it's a potential candidate for an acquisition?
It is. There's been a lot of consolidation in the industry, Sue. Obviously, fee pressure has forced money managers to come together for economies of scale purposes. Legg Mason's a beneficiary of asset growth that's occurring not only in the U.S. but around the world, as obviously equity prices have inflated. And at the same time, though, may stand to benefit from being acquired by a larger operator who's once again looking for economies of scale. And
we mentioned at the top that you like some European equities, and your third choice is another ETF that goes under the ticker EUSC. I gather that means small caps.
It is at that, Tyler. The fact is, Europe is growing at above trend rate. Last year, it grew faster than the U.S. for the first time since 1998. We like the tailwind there. Monetary accommodation remains very vibrant. And of course, as it relates to their domestic economy, unemployment continues to trend down, not unlike here in the United States. So small caps that are more domestically oriented are going to stand to benefit from a much better consumer that's obviously growing along with the Eurozone economic activity.
Your first pick was that home builder ETF. Is there any storm impact, positive or negative, on that index because of Hurricane Irma?
Certainly there was a threat early on, particularly related to those home builders that have large exposure in and around the Texas region. But ultimately, obviously, through the rebuilding process, there's going to be an uptick in activity as a result of it. So I think in the aftermath, we're going to see, obviously, housing-related activity resume back to trend.
All right, Mark, thanks very much. Have a great weekend. Mark
Thank
Buschini,
you.
Janie Montgomery, Scott.
Coming up, our cameras were there when teams of police officers fanned out across one of the nation's busiest airports to protect you from what they consider a serious threat. Hartford, Connecticut is warning that it could file for bankruptcy. The mayor of the state capital says the city will be unable to meet its financial obligations in about 60 days without state aid. Aid for the city is tied to the state budget, which lawmakers have been unable to agree upon for the fiscal year that began July 1st. Hartford is asking for about $40 million.
Well, from TSA screening to security you don't see, protecting the public at U.S. airports is big business. Today, airports around the country confront what's known as the insider threat, the people who actually work at the airports. In the second part of a Nightly Business Report exclusive, Morgan Brennan goes behind the scenes with police, looking at everything from random employee checks to counting sharp knives used at terminal restaurants. It's all taking place at LAX, Los Angeles International, the second busiest in the country.
We're behind security, inside hidden passageways at Los Angeles International Airport, where the public isn't allowed. A multi-agency police operation is focusing on the people who work at the airport itself to find anyone deemed an insider threat.
When we work this detail, we have a zero tolerance.
Zero tolerance means something small could turn into something big.
When you look around this terminal, what are you seeing?
I'm looking around for opportunists that are preying on the travelers, but mostly I'm looking for some kind of criminal element, something that sticks out that needs to be looked at a little bit more.
It all starts at 9 a.m. in a briefing room at the Aviation Police Department headquarters.
This is the only task force of its kind that does an operation like this in the nation at any major airport.
As teams of officers prepare to head out, Captain Tyrone Stallings tells us there's a clear game plan.
What do you expect to see today?
Well, we usually want to see a show of force, uniforms, high visibility in a certain specific area, and also we want to address the insider threat.
The operation has begun. We see highly visible officers armed with rifles as we ride up the escalator with Lieutenant Henry Acosta in the international terminal. And it doesn't take long for something to happen.
Okay, we're on our way to gate 134.
As we navigate elevators and restricted passages, we eventually wind up on the airfield. Police are questioning this ramp worker, pulled over after a random ID check. It turns out the employee has an active warrant for a pending DUI case.
Hey, go sprint your feet for me, please.
He's going to be arrested and likely lose his job.
Seems like the other employees have been watching very closely what's going on, too.
They do.
I imagine word's spreading.
Probably the first hour we set up and we started doing everything, they were texting, phoning the other employees, hey, the police are out here.
To get an airport ID badge, all 54,300 employees undergo a criminal background check and get fingerprinted. But the random reviews keep track of whether someone's record has changed. Elsewhere, TSA officers are conducting their own surprise searches of employees. LAX is so serious about the issue, it employs 2 intelligence analysts whose sole job is to look for any and all threats. Anthony McGinty and Michelle Sosa were hired 3 years ago, the first of their kind to work directly for an airport. Their intelligence gathering extends beyond the passenger terminals to cargo areas around LAX, the 5th busiest in the country, with about 2.2 million metric tons passing through each year. Items from iPhones to international mail loaded on and off planes and shipped worldwide.
How real is the insider threat?
I think that is probably one of our top concerns, and we briefed that to the stakeholders, the airline security managers, and they're all aware. I mean, everybody's aware of this. And I think it goes hand in hand with some of the criminal activity that you may see at airports that we pay attention to. If somebody is trying to smuggle bulk cash or drugs, they're getting paid to put something on an aircraft. And the concern is, when are they going to know that it's a bomb and not drugs that they're being asked to put on board?
The TSA has been very good at securing above the wing, but oftentimes below the wing, and what goes on around the airplane, and people who have access to the airplane. In many versions, that's what we're kind of worried about.
Even what appear to be potential low-level threats are routinely monitored. Our cameras captured this inspection of knives at a steakhouse in the international terminal.
And I just need to go inside the kitchen and look at the knives that are currently outstanding right now.
In the kitchen, the knives are all where they should be, a process that takes only a few minutes.
Okay, great. Looks like all the knives that are checked out are all accounted for.
Officer Sean Foley says every single restaurant employee is trained about properly keeping track of cutlery.
It's a pretty daunting process for us, but it's a very important process.
And as the police operation into insider threats is winding down, Lieutenant Acosta reflects on that very issue on everyone's mind: safety.
Knowing what you know about how an airport like LAX operates, is it hard to think about getting on a plane or traveling or just knowing the threats that could be out there?
Me personally, no. You're safe boarding an aircraft and flying. You're safe.
For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan.
They check the cutlery in the restaurants. That is detail. You can read more about security at LAX on our website, nbr.com.
And that is Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Tyler Matheson. If you're in the path of the storm, stay safe. Have a good weekend, everybody else, and we'll see you back here safely on Monday.